And he's here. He is here. Cristiano has entered the building. Welcome, wherever you are, to the Old Trafford Theatre.
Yes, guys, welcome back to this episode of the Sculptor Podcast. Today, we are in a new studio, and I'm back in Australia, and I've set up this area, and if you're watching on YouTube, you can see around me, it is looking all very good. And today I am listening to Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth. Now, I thought this was going to be an interesting one because Angela Duckworth is someone who I have learnt quite a lot from, but passion is something that I don't agree with, which if you listen to me, you would know. So I would be interested to hear a little bit more about Angela Duckworth's take on this. And with that being said, I'm going to switch to my computer, which you should be able to see now, and let's listen to it.
When I was 27 years old, I left a very demanding job in management consulting for a job that was even more demanding, teaching. I went to teach 7th graders math in the New York City public schools. And like any teacher, I made quizzes and tests, I gave out homework assignments. When the work came back, I calculated grades. What struck me was that IQ was not the only difference between my best and my worst students. Some of my strongest performers did not have stratospheric IQ scores. Some of my smartest kids weren't doing so well. And that got me thinking. The kinds of things you need to learn in 7th grade math, sure, they're hard. Ratios, decimals, the area of a parallelogram. But these concepts are not impossible. And I was firmly convinced that every one of my students could learn the material if they worked hard and long enough. After several more years of teaching, I came to the conclusion that what we need in education is a much better understanding of students and learning from a motivational perspective, from a psychological perspective. In education, the one thing we know how to measure best is IQ. But what if doing well in school and in life depends on much more than your ability to learn quickly and easily? So I left the classroom and I went to graduate school to become a psychologist. I started studying kids and adults in all kinds of super challenging settings. And in every study, my question was, who is successful here and why? My research team and I went to West Point Military Academy. We tried to predict which cadets would stay in military training and which would drop out. We went to the National Spelling Bee and tried to predict which children would advance farthest in competition. We studied rookie teachers working in really tough neighborhoods, asking which teachers are still going to be here in teaching by the end of the school year. And of those, who will be the most effective at improving learning outcomes for their students? We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. In all those very different contexts, one characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. And it wasn't social intelligence, it wasn't good looks, physical health, and it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals.
One thing that I probably should clear up on passion is kind of the usage of it. I think that the usage of it is the bad thing, if that makes sense, not the core reality of passion, because I think that the usage of it is in terms of you should go pursue your passion and things like that. I don't agree with that. Having passion for something, that's a thing, right? I mean, I have more passion for something, but people who talk about passion are typically talking about passion being something that's, for example, not in their control. they talk about passion as being something that's like, as if it was conscripted to them at birth, and they came out of their mum's womb, and they just had all of these things that lined up with what they wanted to do. But I completely disagree with that, because you can have passion for anything if you want. I've said this about motivation before. I think that motivation and passion are pretty similar. If your family members were burning in a house and they were asleep and you had to go save them, you've got a pretty big passion for that. You know, your passion's never been higher. Your motivation has never been higher. Your drive, all of this, your hunger, all of these different things have never been higher. All of these buzzwords, passion, drive, hunger, motivation, I think it's all about the incentive. And it's all about how close that incentive is and how close you see it being relevant to you. I think that's actually all it is. Now, I kind of stopped it just before Angela started speaking a little bit more, but we'll hear what she's got to say.
Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. A few years ago, I started studying grit in the Chicago public schools. I asked thousands of high school juniors to take grit questionnaires, and then waited around more than a year to see who would graduate. Turns out that grittier kids were significantly more likely to graduate, even when I matched them on every characteristic I could measure, things like family income, standardized achievement test scores, even how safe kids felt when they were at school. So it's not just at West Point or the National Spelling Bee that grit matters, it's also in school, especially for kids at risk for dropping out. To me, the most shocking thing about grit is how little we know, how little science knows about building it. Every day, parents and teachers ask me, how do I build grit in kids? What do I do to teach kids a solid work ethic? How do I keep them motivated for the long run? The honest answer is, I don't know. What I do know is that talent doesn't make you gritty. Our data show very clearly that there are many talented individuals who simply do not follow through on their commitments. In fact, in our data, grit is usually unrelated or even inversely related to measures of talent. So far, the best idea I've heard about building grit in kids is something called growth mindset. This is an idea developed at Stanford University by Carol Dweck, and it is the belief that the ability to learn is not fixed, that it can change with your effort. Dr. Dweck has shown that when kids read and learn about the brain and how it changes and grows in response to challenge, they're much more likely to persevere when they fail because they don't believe that failure is a permanent condition. So growth mindset is a great idea for building grit, but we need more. And that's where I'm going to end my remarks, because that's where we are. That's the work that stands before us. We need to take our best ideas, our strongest intuitions, and we need to test them. We need to measure whether we've been successful, and we have to be willing to fail, to be wrong, to start over again with lessons learned. In other words, we need to be gritty about getting our kids grittier. Thank you.
Right. A few little sound effects there, getting a little bit carried away, if you didn't hear. Maybe this could be going completely wrong right now. This is my first time doing it, so if you're not hearing sound effects, I tried to add a few sound effects in there because, engagement. But if you didn't, then I still got to work out a few things. But I think there's a lot there with Angela talks about she doesn't know where grit comes from. I think it has to do with progressive overload, to be honest, and the incentive becoming closer and closer. I think that limiting distractions makes you more, as she calls, grittier. Now, that's not based on evidence. There's going to be a lot of exceptions in there, but I think if you want to give yourself the best chance of being grittier, you eliminate distractions, and you basically just focus more and more. You realize that you're in complete control, because I think that people who aren't grittier, who aren't gritty, they would then start to blame things on external, and they would say, oh, it's because I'm not motivated or whatever, X, Y, and Z. They're just making excuses for themselves, and I think that people who just stick to something, they're really true to what they're doing. Their conviction's so high, and I think that they are the people who actually are the gritty ones. Now, Angela says that it's about motivation. As I said, I think it's about the incentive, the things, the progressive overload, starting small and just growing and growing and refining and refining and refining. So she does make some good points. I think she brings a lot of light to it. Now, this is even an older TED Talk, but maybe her approach has changed. I've definitely heard a lot of different things about Angela Duckworth, about grit, and especially from Carl Dweck. That's the one. She will also mention Carl Dweck about the growth mindset, and I often get those two confused. But I think that there's definitely a lot of good things from Angela Duckworth, and she does spit a lot of facts, I will say that. But maybe I don't agree too much with the terminology, because she talks about motivation a lot. Now, maybe if I was to sit down with her and explain my perspective, maybe she'd be agreeing with it. I'm just putting different words to it, because I've said this before, right? I think that motivation's real. It's just that the way that people use it, I don't think is real, where they're talking about like an external thing carrying them away and taking them to do something. But really, I don't agree with that at all. But I hope that you could take something away from there. It wasn't too long, but I think the main thing that you should take away from this is actually Angela Duckworth. I think you should just listen to more Angela Duckworth, because she says a lot of really good things and there's a lot to take away from her. But guys, I hope you enjoyed that one. Pretty short, as I said. New studio, hopefully it works well. If not, you're just going to be listening to the audio, because I just recorded the audio in case. But yeah, I will catch you tomorrow.